Start with a payment done. Try to have one if you don't have one, and order your content, make it accessible, make it structured. It's going to be sustainable, it's going to be accurate, and it's going to future-proof your search dominance. Hi, I'm Damien Robert, and this is SEO in 2026.
Damien, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
The number one tip is reorder your content to future-proof search dominance.
Reorder your content to future-proof search dominance. Okay, so is search dominance more difficult in 2026?
It's not necessarily more difficult, but it will really make us change our mind, really like a mind shift on how we see and organize, structure, order our contents on our websites. And not only on our website, actually, the content that we want to offer to the users. So really going far away from content on a page, web pages, but more thinking about like modular content, structured content, content as blocks, reusable across different channels and platforms, more than just like writing pages and pages of content.
And you started off by saying reorder your content. So what do you mean by reordering your content?
Well, make it reorderable, first of all. So make sure that you can order it. You can be flexible with your content. But when I say reorder too, it means like put always the evidence first in your content. That's also another point.
So put the evidence first. So if it's a lengthy article, kind of summarize it initially.
Yes, exactly. And not only a summary, but more like what is ungeneratable by the LLMs first. That goes first.
So if it's some kind of conclusion, then start with your conclusion first of all, and perhaps the data that you share and why you came up with that conclusion, and then start with the article.
Yeah, make sure that you can actually do that on your website. But yeah, it would be the idea, really, like start with a conclusion. Don't tease the users. Now, in this modern world, we don't have time. People don't have time to actually wait for the end of the article to actually have the solution.
That sounds like you should structure your articles in the same way that many top YouTubers structure YouTube videos, because many YouTube videos start off with the conclusion or a significant highlight of the video to get people's attention, and then once they've captured someone's attention, tell them briefly about the channel, and then, hi, welcome, today we're going to cover. So it's a bit of a reverse logic, but it seems to be the way to capture users' attentions nowadays. And obviously you're encouraging websites to have the same structure. People who manage content websites to have the same structure, aimed at, I guess, humans as well as search engines.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, always serve users first. But in that way, you will serve LLMs and search engine bots too, because that's a juicy bit will come first. And of course, it's going to attract attention. But not only, it is really, really matching modern behaviors of getting content in this world. We want everything really quick. We don't want to wait. We don't want to read. People want really one info straight away. And the evidence first is actually not that new. It's really a traditional way of doing marketing. When you put the stats first, the clinical evidence, for example, I work in the medical sector. I know that clinical evidence is something that we want to know, that all the rest of the content is based on that. Because if it's not based on that, it's not going to get the interest of the end users.
So you were talking about starting with the conclusion, starting with the evidence initially, and that's a different way of structuring your content than perhaps someone used to maybe 5 years ago or so. Are there any other different elements that you would advise on incorporating within your content nowadays in order to future-proof the way that your structure takes hold and to make sure that your structure is relevant to LLMs in the future?
Yeah, sure. I mean, evidence, of course, starts everything that you can actually add and to do to reclaim your content, make it really ungeneratable. LLMs are good to remix content, remix lots of different sources. But this is your content. You need to reclaim it. This is what you can say about your services and your products or anything you offer to the users.
I'm sorry. What does reclaiming it mean? Does reclaiming it mean that you're making it more indexable by AI search engines?
Or you are infusing stats, infusing evidence behind your content. Reclaiming, meaning that you were the source of the content and you are actually claiming that again in your content on really on the top of the page.
Can you do this with existing content? So perhaps you've published blog posts in the past that are more opinion-based, and perhaps you can add more evidence to these blog posts to make them more appealing to AI search engines and perhaps the way that consumers prefer to consume content nowadays?
Yeah, I would definitely do that and really make a good inventory of juicy content on a website. Trying to go really to modular content strategy, making sure that everything can actually be contained in a box, really. That would be the idea of seeing the content in the future.
So what does a modular content strategy actually mean?
It means that you create different blocks of content. I mean, content can be something that, of course, you are saying, evidence-based, but there can be images, there can be different media assets, and you put all of these in different boxes that you are actually reusing across different platforms and channels, really. So it's a little bit like the idea of a headless CMS sometimes. If people know what it is, it's like being able to actually use these blocks a little bit like a Lego and build and rebuild different pages or different assets.
Okay, but what you're essentially saying is that consider different elements within your content page with a view to it being published elsewhere, perhaps being published on social media, but also sections within it consumed by LLMs to be consumed elsewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. And the best way of doing that really is to start thinking PIM and DAM. So these solutions exist in big groups and lots of people know that already and have heard about them, but you don't need to be a big brand to actually have a PIM and a DAM. So PIM is a product information management system and a DAM is a digital asset management system. So they're both databases and they're here to be the single source of truth of your content, your offer, your services, your products, everything about your brand and what you want to deliver on the web.
And you're also keen for the content to be accessible by design. What does that mean?
Yes, this is time now. Accessibility is trendy. We all know about the new law that came into force this year, but more than really being obsessed about compliance, accessible by design means that you make your content the easiest to be digestible by LLMs and by users. And there is the lazy LLM principle, that we know that LLMs will always try to find the easiest path to information to actually retrieve it and take it to the source. So they like to drink the water from the source, really, and where it's really easy to access. If you make your content accessible and your digital assets accessible, you are sure that your content is well structured and easily structured. It's like logically organized and it will please LLMs and of course all users.
Okay, I didn't know that LLMs were lazy as well as people, but maybe everyone has limited resources and you have to consume what's easier to consume. And in relation to that, you also advocate your content to be as clear as possible, clarity for all. So that talks about writing style and making it easy to be understood. So is there a certain age range that you recommend writing content for?
The age range, you said?
Yes, exactly. I've heard before, write as if someone's in grade 7 or grade 8, as if someone's maybe 12 years old or something like that. So even though you're aiming for an adult audience, you want to use a certain simplified type of English to make sure that it's concise and easy to understand, and people aren't going to get bored and leave your content before they actually consume what you're writing about.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is also an accessible principle, really, to match the average age of literacy in a country. So this is a principle that has been, really highlighted by all the accessible best practices. So yeah, I would say definitely, but it depends on the content too. If you want to be a subject expert about something, of course, it will be a little bit technical. It will be technical sometimes. So it depends of which content you're talking about. If you're describing a product, if you're describing a service, I would definitely go for basic English, very simple wording. But if you are going deep into a subject, you will have to become technical. So this principle is a little bit less universal than the other ones in terms of accessibility. But yeah, it's really good to always ask yourself the question, can I actually make that more simple?
And I guess check to see what LLMs are already publishing from your competitors and see what they like and what they don't like, and perhaps be led by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, please don't generate content from LLMs and publish it on your website. That makes me shiver all the time. I hear that everywhere in companies and all that. How can I use LLM to actually publish articles on my website? Just don't do that. Why would you do that? Because the user is going to do that with LLMs already. So they are going to get that content. So why do you want to publish it on your website? This is kind of a terrible idea. And being in the industry, in the SEO industry for 20 years, I remember the bad practices. And I think that history is always repeating, isn't it? So I have the feeling that we're going back sometimes to bad practices like link farms or spinning articles and things like that. So just don't use LLMs to generate articles on your website.
But many people would advocate to do something like use a specialist LLM, use a custom GPT, use your brand tone of voice, and then pass the article through some filter that would remove any phrases allegedly that LLMs commonly use, so that it's more akin to what a human being would actually write. Do you hate that idea as well?
I think refining is fun. You can use LLMs and this, artificial intelligence to actually get better in what you offer in your content, but don't generate it from scratch from there. Even if you are a little bit scared to face a blank page, but the evidence, clinical evidence, other evidence, stats, testimonials, all of that should always be part of your content. Just self-generate content by LLMs is not going to go really far.
Do you actually use LLMs or AI in any way to produce content at the moment, in any part of your ideation or brainstorming process?
Yeah, in the ideation, sometimes, yeah, for sure, but not pure generation. Clearly not for the content on what I offer.
Okay, and obviously, you also advise on using experts within your content before pure promotional content. Show your credentials and first-hand experience, real stories and voices cut through. So how do you incorporate experts and how do you incorporate real stories?
It's the same, really. Like, how do you do that to make sure that you can reuse it all the time? So it's, again, the principle of modular content. So when you do that, when you've got an expertise, try to put it in a box. Try to put it in a box. Try to put it in your DAM. Try to put it in your PMITS product information, for example. All of this needs to really stay somewhere in databases, more than just like in a piece of content. And then you can reuse, you can refine, you can actually enrich all of that. And that will be your single source of truth. That will also bring consistency throughout your brand messaging, for example, and your vision and your mission and your promise and everything. So by having a single source of truth, really reordering your content, organizing your content somewhere in a DAM, in a PIM, you are really future-proofing your message.
Damien, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
Start with a PIM and DAM. Try to have one if you don't have one, and order your content, make it accessible, make it structured. It's going to be sustainable, it's going to be accurate, and it's going to future-proof your search dominance.
Start with a PIM and DAM. Damien Robert is a search marketing and web accessibility lead. Find out more over at damien-robert.com. Damien, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you, David.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at seoin2026.com.